My name is Pipo Serrano. I'm a journalist specializing in digital matters, and I'll be here with you on this whole session afterwards, moderating a debate, and we'll try to talk about the future of education. Initially, I would like to, I don't know if we'll see it here, but I would like to explain it. We'll have several parts of this session. We'll start with Sandra Rodriguez. She's higher education specialist at UNESCO, and she'll explain us a bit about her point of view. But afterwards, we'll just talk a bit about this report, this interesting paper that basically is presented under this name, The Future of Higher Education, which we will afterwards debate with very good specialists and hopefully with all of you, because I would love to have some questions from you. So let's first introduce and have on board on the floor to Sandra Rodriguez so that she can, wherever you want, she can share with you her point of view. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. I don't know if it's working.
Yeah?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for being here. For us, as UNESCO, I mean, this is a dream that has been come true. Since the very beginning, people thought that you are crazy thinking and dreaming in this big and ambitious conference. It was very hard to knock doors and find to people trust in your dreams and betting for what you feel, no? That it's to improve education and work for a higher education that is more inclusive, because I want to request you to keep this in mind, inclusiveness. So one of these supporters, the first supporters was Mobile Capital Foundation, that personally, I knocked that door one day saying, listen, you are on the spot on technology, digital technology, and we need you. We need you because we are a community. We are an ecosystem that we need it from others. So I tried to at least be a little bit make a little bit of criticism, saying that we are used to hear all the time disruptive learning, creativity, innovation, what else? New economies. But we have all these narratives learned. However, I want to summarize all these ideas in one concept and one feeling. For us, it's open scenarios as a result of technology development and uncertainty, that feeling, right? Of this changing scenario that once you have learned, you know how this works, one from another moment disappears. And then again start this feeling of uncertainty. For instance, to give you an example that I'm quite close to it, is like role video games. You know, they are open scenarios that you need to follow your path, trial and error, and once you have learned one episode, you need to start another one, right? So I dare to say that these two things are the main reasons that take us to this conference. That is open scenarios and uncertainty. Based on this statement from UNESCO, we have the responsibility to guarantee society the coexist and life in every single scenario that is coming. We talk about futures by this reason, because there is not only one scenario. We have more and more, but we don't know in which scenario we are going to play, like in the video game. By this reason, I mentioned it before. Our duty is the pursuit that the right to education comes a reality from the lifelong learning path. We talk about right to education from early childhood until higher education and beyond. That means that we need to recognize all talents. That means also that we need to create inclusive communities. and networks of collaborations. This is why we are here. This is why we invite all the actors of the higher education ecosystem. That means inclusive, to be inclusive in itself. In that sense, we need also to improve research to be at the forefront of these new scenarios. That not means only education, that means also health, that this means also research on technology, that means also to pursue new knowledge in those new scenarios. And also, I can continue with a long list that you know, because all the time in these kind of panels, we repeat and repeat and repeat the same concepts. But summarize, I really want that you take seriously inclusion. Inclusion from technologies, inclusion from education in itself. We can say right now that to be inclusive means that have access to technology must be a right in itself. So when we use the word inclusive, we mean inclusive at universities as facilitators of every single dimension that implies education. That said, here are the key questions as a teacher that I am, and I want to put on the table. Based on the previous statement that I present and that these extraordinary panelists are going to discuss here, that are the following ones. What to teach in the futures of education, how to teach, and where to teach, and finally, who will address all these challenges. To sum up, this report is going to be just a small piece to land this statement, to live no longer in the world of the ideas, to illustrate new scenarios and try to answer all these questions. What, how, where, and finally, who will address all these challenges. Many thanks, and I hope that after this roundtable, you keep wondering the W questions to guarantee the right to education in futures. Thank you so much, and enjoy this panel.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sandra. This reminds me a bit when I was studying journalism on my first years, that the first thing they teach you to learn is the 5 Ws, which actually there is a how, which is not a W, and then it's a 6. So we can apply that to education now. Okay, so let's move on. I would like to share with you now, with the help of Jordi Arrufí, the report that's presented. They just worked on this, the future of higher education. Probably you've heard or you know about Jordi Arrufí. He's the Digital Talent Program Director at Mobile Capital Barcelona, and I would love you to join us in the stage so that you can share a bit some insights.
Thank you very much.
Jordi.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Sandra, people from the UNESCO to inviting us today to follow up the discussion about so many questions that we have. And of course, thank you to EDT partners that were our partners in crime in developing this report. And thank you to Fernando that he will join us in 10 minutes. He is leading this report.
I will do something. I know it's not appropriate. Do you mind moving a bit over there?
Yeah.
There's no way they will see it.
Okay.
And if not, your face is not as nice as it normally is.
Thank you. He's a friend of mine, so he has confidence to say and do that. So thank you very much also, Fernando and all the team of EDT partners. Let me start with a little anecdote, true story. This morning I was listening to the radio. Yes, there's still people who listen to the radio. And they were interviewing a CEO of a company, of a startup, saying that he's able to predict how likely a vine, so the plant that produces grapes to produce wine, is about to get or to develop an illness. So this kind of predictability is, let's say, enabling farmers to be more productive, for instance. And I thought, okay, but this is very similar to what is going on in the healthcare industry. So if you envision healthcare industry in the years to come, probably it comes to your mind certain concepts like, preventive healthcare, like being able to predict how likely a patient will develop a certain disease. How are we going to suggest a tailor-made treatment for this person so in order to avoid to develop this specific disease. Nowadays we have supercomputers from IBM, from Google and so on, able to diagnose cancer while more accurate than physicians itself. And also to provide a tailor-made treatment for every single patient. So it means customization of healthcare. But of course, if we think in any other industry, for instance, manufacturing. Nowadays, manufacturing facilities are creating their own digital twins. So it means that all the sensors are connected to a cloud and provide us a real-time picture about what's going on in this factory. So again, we can, for instance, prevent damages. We can also prevent or to predict to what extent there is a spark paste in this specific machine that is about to get broken, so we can replace it before and our logistics will work smoothly, right? And of course they are servitizing, they are creating layers of digital sensors, clouds and so on top of the product, so they are able to also produce services. But also, last example, retail, for instance. Of course, retail was one of the most advanced industries in bringing digitization to the market. They started with the e-commerce a long time ago. Nowadays, you can hop into a store with your mobile phone, you can check in. You can even have a customized experience with augmented reality, and maybe they will provide you a special price for you because you are a loyal customer, right? So again, customization, predictive maintenance, also being able to predict what's going on. Also, smooth user experience. This is happening in every single industry. And this is because of technologies like IoT, artificial intelligence, big data, and so on and so on. But this is just the toolkit, right? That is enabling big transformations in every single industry. And of course, also in higher education. Maybe there's still people that thinks that education or higher education will be the single industry that will skip all the transformations, because actually this industry has been working more or less the same way over the last hundreds of centuries, right? But especially those specialists that we interviewed, plus all the publications, papers, plus the signals that we already see in the marketplace of higher education, bring us to think that actually deep transformation is about to happen also in the higher education industry in the years to come, in the decades to come. So now let me introduce you to 5 big signals that we already see, that we already identified, that bring us to think that actually real transformation will happen also in the higher education industry. For instance, transformation of the value chains. Of course, the platform economy is mushrooming in every single industry, also in the higher education industry. So nowadays there are hundreds of thousands of people that already join a massive online course. And this is apparently good for higher education because it allows you to reach out new audiences, new students that maybe you weren't able to address. But on the other hand, it is true that this is a challenge because platform economy is replacing the monopoly of the content creation to publishers and higher education institutions. For instance, recently it was Coursera along with Meta, remember Facebook? Remember a company was called Facebook? So along with Meta, they are creating courses on programming available for free in this kind of platforms. 2 years ago, it was the vice president of Google saying, okay, we partnered up also with, in this case was Coursera, so we have created our own online courses. Okay, they're available for $50 per month. And of course, if you pass this course, you are as likely to join our company as if you have attended to a grade in a school or in a university, right? So of course, there are just trends signals. This is not mushrooming. This is not just a mainstream, but it's something that is happening. And of course, even individuals, we have lecturers are even not teachers, just individuals that are sharing the knowledge in this kind of streaming platforms like Twitch, holding and gathering together communities of thousands or millions of people. And of course, the platform economy is an opportunity, but on the other hand, it's also a challenge because the content is being more distributed. Another trend or signal is how universities and higher education is pivoting its value proposition, even its content. According to World Economic Forum, by 2025, 9 out of the top 10 most trendy job offers will be digital. So digital transformation specialists, big data analysts, web programmers, and so on and so on. So of course, as a school, as a college, you have to tailor-make, or apparently, if regulation allows you, to pivot and to evolve your content. So for instance, there are already many, especially American institutions, partnering with bootcamps, right? Here in Spain, I hope there's no bootcamp here and no university, they tend to fight, they're against. While in the United States, they're partnering because the bootcamp is able to provide this last mile knowledge about the last, programming language that the market needs. And this not competes with the, overall content that the, for instance, software engineering program can provide you. And also, micro-credentials, and I know that our MIT will talk as of today probably about micro-credentials, right? So it's a way also to be able to adapt to our audiences the content and also to provide a more tailor-made pathway. Third signal, of course, immersive learning ways, channels, new channels. Way before someone had the idea to put a tag into something it was already existing, it was called VR. And I say, no, this is a metaverse, okay? But way before that happened, the industry was betting for immersive technologies, especially to provide an immersive learning experience. For instance, for physicians, for industrial engineering, for every single use case, you can have an immersive experience learning. But of course, there are some universities following this hype and creating their own metaverse schools. So it's not only that you have an immersive experience while learning, but in the entire virtual experience when you are interacting with the campus. And this is already happening. We will see if this, ends up as a main trend or is just a signal and maybe will disappear over the next years. Of course, new ways to segment customers, new ways to segment students. Nowadays, we are able to hyper-customize the same way as healthcare is hyper-customizing the treatment, the same way as retail is able to hyper-customize their value proposition to their customers. Higher education will be able to hyper-customize the experience of the student. Nowadays, for instance, and of course, we have a representative of anthology today, and he will tell us better, but they are working up with solutions in order to customize the experience, and maybe in the near future, to create just a few entrances for higher education students, but millions of thousands of possible exits, because everyone will take its own pathway. And finally, the university, the higher education institution, as a part of an ecosystem. As it happens to every single company that is fighting to thrive in this uncertain environment, you have to be very agile. And in order to be very agile, very innovative, in order to pivot fast, you have to engage with third parties. For instance, in order to create innovation for third parties, this is a program of Moawo Capital that helps other companies to create startups. So it's a venture builder. We create the startups out of the knowledge of research centers in the university, but the other way around. So universities are creating open innovation. So they are sourcing innovation from students itself, researchers, but also startups from the outside, other universities, in order to drive innovation and be competitive. And also, of course, startups and the ed tech topic is becoming more and more a hot topic, because Many startups are bringing innovation into the ecosystem, but as I mentioned, universities will have the challenge to be able to adapt and be able to work with those startups in order to drive innovation. So those are the signals that let us, envision a future of higher education. And Fernando, please welcome to stage, will tell us more about which are those trends that we envision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordi. And I want to thank Sandra and UNESCO for the opportunity to be here. Today we're going to talk about this report that we have been working for the past 6 months. And also want to thank the team from EDT, especially Andrea, who was a fundamental resource to this work, as much as Claudia, Mireia, and the team that is in Singapore and in Europe. This has been a global effort. We have talked to leaders, thought leaders in Europe, the US, Asia, Latin America. We put together a vision that basically is going to enable a conversation for the next 20 years. We had to be certified. Anna, I'm sorry, I didn't see you in the team, so Anna, thank you for being here. So the discussion that we're aiming is to take us through the next 20 years about what the future of education could be, higher education. We met with people like Michael Crow from Arizona State, Ben Nelson from Minerva, with Rosanne Bosch, the architect from Denmark. We also met with Tadi Blecher from South Africa, who's doing inclusive education at scale. We met with Peter Cohen, who was one of the leaders of Phoenix University, fully online, decades ago. We met with Antonio Carbonari, the leading Brazilian higher education online expert that started a university for 1 million students 15 years ago. And what we asked them is, what do we learn after COVID? How would you imagine a university in 2022 where doing something better than we were 2 years ago is not enough? We improved 30%, we improved 25% is not enough. We need to improve radically and exponentially. To do that, we obtained a certification from the Institute for the Future, and we began using their tools to predict the future. But there is no one future. There's many different futures. So we started seeing how there are some trends in education, like going to the university once in your lifetime, graduating. What does graduating mean? What is a diploma worth? Things that are depreciating, and we're not seeing them because we think they're normal. And also we see some other forces that are being appreciated. So this is part of the report. There's many forces that are being depreciated, many forces that are being appreciated, and some of the things that Jordi and Sandra mentioned in terms of inclusiveness. So from that report, from that methodology, the signals, some signals are very early, some are weird, some are compelling, some are transformational. These signals, we have to internalize them in a university. To do this report, we analyzed over 800 signals. We read about 120 reports. We interviewed experts. We discussed with many stakeholders from different perspectives. And this is something that we discussed with Michael Crow from Arizona State. This is a model that he invented with his team. This is what we call the layered university. This is the central part of the education. You have a nucleus, you have a core set of values in your university. What does university stand for? And then you're going to have a layer that happens in the physical space, but learning is a force, it's not a space anymore. So from that physical space, then you need to add technology and augment the physical experience. When you're augmenting the physical experience, then you begin drawing different borders between what is happening online, what is happening offline. Why would you go to a university, and to bring Rosanne Bosch words, why would you bring students and teachers to a university that resembles a prison rather than a place to learn? Why don't you think about physical spaces more than drive the potential of learning rather than close boxes similar to a prison? So then you have additional layers that open this university for inclusiveness. You don't have to be enrolled to a university. What if you are subscribed to a university for the rest of your life? Those are different concepts that are going to take us into the future. This layer university is going to go all the way to the metaverse with different layers, but you never lose the core of what this university is supposed to be. The other concept has to do with this physical space, digital space, and phygital, the mix. Everything would happen in these three spaces. You cannot think of a university and say, we are a physical university. The core of our university is the campus. That is not necessarily true anymore. So this idea of three layers, physical, digital, and phygital, that basically expand the experience for teachers, students, in a way that you can become actively engaged with technology, passively engaged with technology, or not engaged with technology at all. All of these discussions need to be designed. How do we design them? In a workshop with Rosanne Bosch from Denmark, we started looking at three variables. The fixed dimension. And these three dimensions go in three verticals. You can have people, time, and space. What about space that is fixed? What about people that are fixed into your university? And what about time that is fixed? But then you think about flux. What about space, time, and people that are flux, that are going to pass through your university? And the third concept is flexibility, full flexibility. Flexible time, flexible people, flexible spaces. So when we think about spaces in the future, we're not going to look at classrooms. We're not going to look like prisons anymore. We're going to look like spaces where the potential of human learning. And if you're going to displace yourself to a physical campus, there must be a compelling reason for you to be in that space at that time. That concept is one of the 7 pillars that we brought together. How do you get to the future of higher education? By working on these 7 dimensions. And we use some terms. First is the moreversity. We're moving away from this word of university to a moreversity, a multiversity, which is a concept that has to do with multiple segments, multiple generations, multiple life stages at the time. Moreversity, more products, more times, more segments, more certifications. We also saw that the system, that the university needs to be an ecosystem, like Jordi just mentioned. We need to bring innovation from the outside. We need to connect. Universities are typically good to talk between themselves with similar universities. But a university that talks with a challenger university, that's not common. A university that talks with startups, not common. A university that talks to venture capital, not common. So universities, when they hear the word collaboration, they typically fix their minds to say, yeah, we collaborate with our friend's university. That's, you know, like the friend shore, near shore, friend shore. But you have to do much more than just collaborating with similar universities. You need to open yourself up to open innovation, bring startups, bring venture capital, bring technology. The other thing is purposeful. I always struggle with this word in English, sorry. The idea is that the university must have a purpose. And this has to be the compelling reason why a student and a teacher will be subscribed to this university. We also saw this idea of pathways and traces. What are the pathways that our students are going to be driven through? And what are the traces that they leave behind so other people, other universities, other enterprises can see those traces and validate and make sense of those as signals? The other thing is that technology will be non-stoppable. $21 billion have been invested in 2021 for edtech startups, $21 billion. And this does not include the investments that are happening in artificial intelligence, in augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, that are coming in an accelerated pace into education. And the final one that I called from surviving to thriving in uncertainty has to be with leadership. We all, and I have heard this over and over again, we survived COVID. We were able to adapt. We were able to Zoom our classes. That is not enough. That is not the future. Zooming our classes and surviving COVID was just a call for action. The idea is that we're going to live in a world that is much more uncertain and that we have an abundance of content, but actually we don't know how to solve the most relevant problems, like the gaps of access, the digital divide, gender gaps that are still very, very painful. So this is the idea of the new leadership of the university. And I'm going to close by with this model that we implemented by inspiring in the subway of London. We said, what if students in the future will go to any station, take the red line, go to 3 stops, get 3 certificates, then they leave the university. They come back through the yellow line and they follow another 3 certificates. And then 6 months later, they come through the gray line and then they achieve another 3 certificates. What is the degree? What is the graduation? When do you stop using the subway? When do you stop learning? That is part of the report, part of the conversation that we like to begin today, and we like to engage you all in discussing, criticizing, changing, adding to this report, because this needs to be a conversation to last over 20 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Jordi. I think it's been great. If you want to see these or download this paper, you can do it in the website of Mobile World Capital Foundation. But if you wait until the end, you'll have a QR code really comfortable to scan and download it, so you better wait. Second thing, when I grow, I want to be like you guys. You just pointed out amazing things, and now we have 30, 40 minutes to debate this, So, so I would like to invite to join me here in the States to Mirko Wiedenhorn, Senior Director at Anthology. Jordi just pointed out. Please join us. Marta Fernandez, Executive Director at Rmit Europe, and also Paulo Alcorn, Specialist in University Teaching and former National Director of University Management in Argentina. Thank you for joining me and for sharing with us this session. There is an interesting part that Sandra was saying. She was pointing out these W's. I believe we are in the century of the how. I mean, we all know many things that we need to do, we need to address, but sometimes it's, and as Fernando was saying, the challenge is how we do it. I mean, we know we need inclusiveness, we need lots of things, but how we do it. And it's all the time that. So we know the what's, but we need the how's. And I don't know if you were yesterday here in the opening. I had the pleasure to be opening the ceremony. And it was really interesting to listen to Professor Skemelkes, to listen to Ms. Azoulay, and so many others. And one thing that just caught my attention, and now we were talking about COVID, was the way this session, and I want to say hello to all of you who are looking from every corner in the world, is being streamed. And that makes a turning point, a change on how education also can reach our young or not that young students eventually, and that would be amazing. So this is something that also will be discussed here. Something that I also learned when preparing yesterday's opening was that 235 million students are in higher education in the world. That's double than 20 years ago, but it will be doubled in 20 years' time. So that means that we need to work hard on that. And of course, as we were saying, and all of you said, we need to grant inclusivity, equity. We need to be adapted to today's time. As Jordi was saying, we've got lots of businesses that are really different. They had an amazing transformation, but sometimes, and we'll see that it's not that way, education seems to be pretty similar to what it used to be some years ago. So, well, and I think the most important thing was something that Sandra said, but yesterday was repeated by many of the authorities, which is basically not leaving anyone behind. Because remember that some people is looking to us from home, but we still have half of the world disconnected, nearly half of the world. So that means that some of these solutions probably are not going to be for all, unfortunately. So, okay, first, I would love you to introduce yourself in 30 seconds, 1 minute to say who you are and what do you represent and how do you envision this future of higher education, and then we'll drive through each of you. So Mirko, whenever you want.
Oh boy, pressure on. So
yeah.
I'm Mirko Wiedenhorn. I'm the Senior Director of Engagement Strategy at Anthology, which you just heard a little bit about in the presentation, but we're the largest now global ed tech company in the world. For those of you not as familiar with us, we merged with Blackboard last October, so you're probably more familiar with the Blackboard name. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be here. In terms of where I see higher education in the future, so I think a core aspect was already touched on, but it's that digital element. COVID happened, we shifted immediately to everything digital. A lot of universities have gone back now to the pre-COVID time, but there's so much opportunity based on what we learned during that 1.5 years or 1 year of crazy COVID-ness of teaching online and how to continue to improve that. And I think that's one of the things we definitely need to think about moving forward to be able to make universities more accessible by 2050.
Great. Marta.
Thank you. I'm Marta Fernandez. I'm the Executive Director of Rmit Europe, so part of the European hub of one of the largest universities in Australia, RMIT. And we have about 100,000 students at our institution, and we're very international. So we have 3 campuses in Melbourne, and you'll be pleased to know that actually we're based in the old gaols of Melbourne. So we do have prisons that have been refurbished, but we keep our executives there, not our students, but very welcome to visit anytime. And then we have a campus in Vietnam with 10,000 students, another 10,000 in Singapore. So very international, and this Oddity, a center in Barcelona, we act as our ecosystem to broaden the presence in Europe, and that's the team that I run. And back to your question on how do we see things, well, highlight three points. One is hybrid. Obviously, technology integration has been mentioned before. Lifelong learning. For us as an institution, 30% of our students are between 25 and 44-year-old. So we're already doing lifelong learning in a way that will be growing. And the third point I will mention is impact, and hopefully we get to explore a little bit of that, because it's not only impacting our students and their experience, but it's also the responsibility we have as institutions to drive impact into industry. As an applied university of technology, that's very critical for us. And also impact in the local ecosystem and impact in society. You know, we do have a responsibility on that front, so hopefully we get to explore a little bit of that.
Yeah, of course. Paulo, go ahead.
Soy Paulo.
My name is Paulo Alcorn. Unfortunately, the speaker does not have a microphone, so the sound is not reaching us properly in the booth. We do beg your pardon. The sound is not reaching us adequately in the booth. We need a microphone for the speaker.
Quería preguntarnos una serie de situaciones y de cuestiones importantes. El informe es... ¿Perdón? Perdón. ¿Empiezo de nuevo?
Shall I start again? Shall I start again?
Very well educated, and they will translate everything into the language you would like to have. They can provide one. By the way, if we can have one here, that would be fantastic for America. Yeah, thank you. Paulo, sorry,
Okay.
go ahead.
Disculpen la...
I'm sorry about the bother. So I understood differently. And I do feel that it is very important to include Spanish. I think it was a decision that was made, and I do believe that we should be using languages as a sign of interculturality and multiculturality. Now, there's something that has to do with time. So there's a rock and roll band in Argentina called the Redonditos de Ricota. The song that's popular of theirs is "The Future Is Now." El futuro ya llegó. So there are presents that are different in our regions, in our communities, and the construction, building the future, channels activity. It means that governments, institutions, and communities need to act, and I believe that this report really does trigger that.
It's interesting. He said the future is just here, it just arrived. Do you mind if I ask you in English?
Yes.
If not, I can just switch in both. But anyway, I was going to ask you, the fact that some technological companies, like, for example, Jody was pointing out with Meta, but some others like Google are having their own kind of universities. But if we just connect that to the fact that probably Google knows, and we will ask that also to Mirko, probably Google knows much more about the students than any of their universities. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Paulo?
Creo que
I think that educational institutions are obliged to defend education as a human right, as a public good, and they need to intelligently participate in the ecosystem. Yesterday, we presented a book on university autonomy. It's almost part of a university's DNA. And that relationship that universities and the educational community have with their surroundings has to be intelligent, just like our smartphones. They need to be smart, intuitive, and we need ties with these companies, with these ecosystems that help, that drive universities. We need to avail ourselves of technology to do what we can better, but we also need to be critical. And we need to solve very serious problems, for instance, huge inequality.
And I want to ask something, Marta, what you were saying on the impact. How do you envision this connection of technology, sometimes integrated in the university, but sometimes aside?
So I think technology is, right, that's the future. We know that's the future. We already have technology in our classrooms today, or most institutions do, but there's so much opportunity, sort of to Paulo's point. Where I see the opportunity is, let's start maybe at the university itself first, by avoiding 60 different technology solutions that has a piece of data here, a piece of data here, a piece of data here, and bringing those together a little bit more, you start to see elements of that data across platforms. And that's how you can start to personalize that student experience more. You can start to see trends more. And that becoming more personal with the student means they're more likely to finish the course, retain at the institution, have a better experience, whether that's online or in person. So to me, that's where data really comes into play, and how technology can help an institution shift how they're doing things. It allows you to reevaluate strategies that may have been in place for 50 years or 10 years.
Okay, that's interesting. And I want to go through how are we going to customize that journey for the students. But before that, and Marta just pointed out those three elements that are key. And you talked about impact, which I consider it's really, really interesting. And I sometimes, with digital, it also happened a bit with COVID, we tend to think that digital is going to just make the whole difference. But we need something core, analogic, 1.0, the old way, the values that need to be kind of good, proper, valuable, and all that, and then make it work, amplifying it with the digital ways, learning with the digital platforms, whatever. Marta, which is the way we can bring value to universities? You work in a university which is leading on that side, so I want to understand what are you doing to, I don't know if it's to compete or to work beside these trends of Google's and other things, and to highlight the importance of the traditional university with a different look at.
Yeah, and thanks for the question. And I guess we're at the moment in the process of reviewing our strategy. We have a new vice chancellor that joined early in the year, and one of the first pillars of the 5 that are being discussed is a mission-driven university. So that's very clear to us. And the core of our strategy is, we say, getting students ready for life and work. That's really what drives us, it's transforming careers, and how do we do it? Because the experience we provide to the students is paramount, and we get evaluated on that. It's all about, can we get the students high employability opportunities after they finish, and we get measured on that. And depending on that, we get government funding. So really, we have to make sure that those students are not only ready with the skills on their disciplines, but also the cognitive and the human skills that they require. So that's one of the elements. And I guess another one on the impact that we mentioned, impact in industry, it's another metric, and it'll be spreading. I mean, countries like the UK have been leading with the research assessment exercise, but many others, Finland, Australia is doing it now. Universities get evaluated by the impact the research has in industry, and they get ranked on that. And government funding will depend on universities being able to articulate that. And a lot of the humanity disciplines are very challenged to demonstrate that, but what they do translates into policy. And maybe the last one that I was mentioning before in terms of local impact, I think there is a fantastic initiative from the Times Higher Education that they are checking how universities have an impact on the SDGs.
Yeah.
And now we all have to there is a rally, I think about 1,500 universities participated this year on that. We're in the top 1%, I'm proud to say, but yeah, we have to really demonstrate how we are addressing our low carbon transition for our own institution, how we are addressing inclusion targets and so on.
Okay, I'll ask you afterwards for some initiatives that I think they're interesting, and they're moving kind of a bit the way we learn, like these micro-credentials, or the way you create kind of joint ventures with companies, private companies and all that. But Paulo, I was thinking in terms of the administration, the governance, the public universities, which are the ones that need to serve our students all over the world. How do they apply these metrics? Are they embracing technology in a way to learn and adapt the way they do things to improve them?
We have to understand that clearly universities tend certainly to be conservative. And it's only right for them to be conservative, well, because we've been around for more than 1,000 years. But nothing guarantees us that we'll have another 1,000 years ahead of us. So we need to be able to adapt, to innovate, and there are certain paradoxes nowadays. We have models of universities that have been consolidated for centuries, and we're teachers in the 20th century, and our students are 21st century students. So we need to spotlight our student body working on training, social insertion, but we very clearly, that is, need to modify our rationales. We need, I'll go back to the issue of time. The decisions that governments, university systems, higher education systems, institutions, not only need to be the right decisions and be legal, they also need to be opportune. So these decisions that are tied to the future need to be taken now. Do you think that universities should be like startups and
This should be like startups in terms of agile and pivoting to move faster if they're able to in terms of the public universities?
Clearly, the academic proposals need to be agile. Universities need to take up their full weight, but they do need to be grounded, and they need to look at research production and teaching processes, learning processes, and they need to be much more up-to-date and close.
And universities are like super tankers, that's how much it takes us to turn So we need to find mechanisms to be able to be agile. And I just wanted to share that not the previous Vice Chancellor we had, he actually came from industry, from Microsoft education products. And in 2017 made the decision to do online. So we created a company separate to the university called Rmit Online. Now the whole of Rmit is online. So, but at the time it was Rmit Online, and in a matter of 4 years they generated revenue of $80 million on short courses and micro credentials and so on. But you kind of need those entrepreneurial characters. You need entrepreneurial leaders that can do those kind of things without disrupting the supertanker, which has a lot of inertia.
Okay, and we are lucky because we have Mirko here, and he's the guy who has to be rapid, really, really fast on this, because when you need agility, someone has to provide the agility. Some others create their tools, but you can provide them one. How do you envision that agility? How are you moving? How do you imagine, or probably what are you planning for the next 5 years?
Yeah, next 5 years, then we're thinking beyond that, but it's even in the next 6 months where are we going, right? Because to talk about agility. But again, at the end of the day, to me, it's about data and bringing that data together and starting to allow universities to identify how to improve the student experience. Going back to mission, the mission has to be student-centric in today's society. In my opinion, it can't be this academic or very academic-oriented mission that doesn't connect with students. It's all about the students, whether that's at a university or in other areas. So how can the student experience be improved, and how can technology help you do that, whether it's the GoPeer partnership that we have with tutoring, virtual tutoring options for students, or whatever it may be, and then enabling universities to identify programs that are potentially beneficial to students. What are companies looking for? What are graduates' expectations of the types of jobs that they will get when they leave? How do we feed that back to the universities, to academic leadership, to make decisions about what majors or programs of study should be looked at, talking about agility and short courses, and where are there opportunities, and are there programs that maybe aren't as relevant anymore? And if so, what should change with those programs? Is the program no longer needed, or do the courses just need to be updated a little bit because employers are looking for a different skill set than what the program had been built for? So I mean, there's so many opportunities to use inputs from across the areas and then feed data on top of that to help universities in that faster decision-making process.
I think I need to ask you two things in a row, but I'll start with the first. How do you use that data in terms of, are you creating, like Fernando was saying a bit, I would love my kids to have a Netflix of education, and instead of paying €10 or dollars a month, paying €10 so that they really learn all the time. But are you using that data to create a Netflix in terms of, if you like that, you should go through this and help them to address or organize, have a strategy on their education?
Yeah, so that's the direction we want to go. So let's just think about it theoretically for a second in terms of the amount of data that you can collect on students. So students fill out course evaluations. Hopefully those are being filled out online. You have a sense of what types of courses an individual student prefers based on where they're giving more positive evaluations. You have that data, they're now registering for their next set of courses in the following semester. And maybe they have 3 courses that they can choose from, or even 3 sections of that same course. You now know the type of course or the type of learning experience that they prefer, the type of professor that they might prefer in terms of teaching style. We can now, through technology, make a recommendation of, this is a course that we think you might prefer of the 3 that they have an option to take, whatever that may be, right? That changes the student experience. And it also makes the advisor's job easier, but it creates that more personal experience as well. They feel like the institution cares about them, the university cares about them, which means retention changes. They're more likely to have a better experience looking back on their education, okay. All of those elements.
Here it comes a second. I already had it in my mind before listening to you, but who's creating that algorithm? I mean, you can create that algorithm, and maybe it takes me to certain places I don't want to go. I mean, when I leave Spotify to choose that amplify list, sometimes I listen to rubbish, and I say, who put that on that list? But it's a song. What's if it's part of my learning? How do you address that algorithms to decide what is good for me and what is not good for me?
Luckily, I'm not on that side of the team, but I mean, that's...
But you're the only one of ontology here.
Exactly,
so.
exactly. But I think that's a key thing that we're thinking about, right? And there's also the question of too much data. Where is that line between the data that we're collecting and where are we overreaching? Now in today's society, there's less concern about that because you just brought up Netflix, Amazon, right? You're getting extremely personalized communications from all of these companies, and that's the expectation, no matter if you're an 18-year-old student or if you're somebody who's 50 and looking to go back to take a short course or start their university degree. So I'm not as worried about that aspect, but in terms of creating that algorithm, it's going to be through a lot of testing and trial and looking at data. We have data on millions of students at this point and the choices that they have made and where they've seen success. And that's how you start to build that algorithm that continues to learn and adjust over time.
Maybe that's the reason why Paulo feels that university needs to be conservative.
Hay una cuestión que
There's an issue that's very important, and that is who's governing the algorithm. I think that educational systems, governments, and institutions need to be able to take a critical look at this, and clearly the chance to bring the future towards us in the present, stay a step ahead. We need to step up actual proportions of graduates. And we also need to take another type of look at things in our work, and that has to do with how we function as societies, what our needs are in terms of trainings. We have gaps that need to be covered, and algorithms aren't going to solve that. It's states, governments, institutions that need to do that, and we need political decisiveness for that.
Very important for anyone who studies, which is occupation. If they can find a job when they finish studying, apart from moving forward, as Fernando was saying, when you are 30, 40, 50, or 60, because you just upskill yourself or reskill or whatever you need. In that sense, Marta, you've got very good rates in terms of occupation at RMIT, and you've got something that is very interesting, which is that kind of joint venture with some strategic companies that are helping you to realize what your students want. I don't know if that algorithm, which is a personal algorithm, because you choose the ones, is a good one, or it can also be biased, because you're choosing Ernst Young and not whatever. But how do you manage that? And which are the results? And I would love to see the results, not only in short, which I can see them, also in mid or long term.
Yeah, that's interesting. We're at the moment doing a whole review of our curriculum architecture, but that particular example, our College of Business has made a decision to stop offering specialized degrees from year one, because in year one, as good as the algorithm is, won't be able to predict what the student wants, and maybe they start marketing, but halfway through it, they realize they want to do finance. So the first 2 years is common across all of them. And then is when they get offered many different options and they can choose which direction to go. And all of that exercise, we're doing it with a series of companies, from banking, from healthcare, from technology, consulting companies, and more than anything else, they are informing us about the graduates that they need, the graduates that they need for that sector. So we're being selective on those organizations. With some of them, they are investing in us. So, Salesforce is very keen on the students learning to use the software, but the students are also keen to learn it because they will be asked for CRM capability when they leave. And at the same time, they are helping us inform our degrees. So we create this very symbiotic relationship where there is mutual benefit, and in the end, it kind of upskills the student to where they need to be when they leave university.
Can I just jump in on a comment here? So I think what you talked about was extremely student-centric, right? Taking away the requirement to choose a specific area in their first year and realizing that's not working. And you saw that wasn't working through data, right? Looking at how many students change degrees. So that's a really easy example of how data, not the algorithm, but data can help with decision-making. And end of the day, you now have an environment that is more student-focused, that doesn't put the pressure on them from day one to choose a path, and then where they're in a situation of wondering, oh, I made the wrong choice, how do I get out of this? So you're taking away that anxiety as well.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. Well, just for any of you, if you're just connected from any place in the world, we were talking about the future of higher education. I would like you to participate also in this debate. So in 10-15 minutes, I will ask you to join us and bring some question to our experts. Also, if you're connected from any place in the world, you can send us through the platform. And that way you will help me also, because if not, I have to do a terrible effort. No, it's not that much. No, I was going to ask you, in that sense, what do you think about these, all of you, because I think it affects to all of you, these softwares or platforms, better platforms than softwares, like the MOOC platforms, like Coursera that Joy was saying, or so many others. Are you kind of working hard to try to do what they do before they do it in your own organizations or with your own students? Are you trying to implement them? What's your strategy on that? Mirko, look at me like that. All of you are looking like...
I can go first.
Go.
Please then jump in.
Yeah.
So clearly there's a market for that and there's an interest for that. I mean, we work with higher ed institutions, so we're not in that specific market, but I think the benefit of that is the ability to take some of these short courses, and some of the universities we work with are offering similar types of courses to their students now. We talked about some of them during the earlier session of what Arizona State is doing, what some of those are doing. But to me, there's still that benefit of going through the university experience. Even if you come in for a few courses, you stop out and then go back, you get a little bit of a different experience than taking a random Coursera course here. It doesn't mean that that's not beneficial, but there's still a place for higher education as we understand it, just in hopefully a slightly different form than what it is today, with more of the online opportunities and some of that.
Yeah. I think from our perspective, it's an opportunity for people to get a taster of the institution. It's certainly not a money maker for the institution. I think we have a partnership with FutureLearn, which is another of these platforms. Our former vice chancellor was one of the founders of FutureLearn, and which is more established in Europe. And we have, I don't know, maybe 10 courses in there. We launched 5 in in the last 4 months. We have 800 learners that we wouldn't have reached by any other means in Europe. So that's how it's useful. How that's going to monetize for us is very uncertain, because the game they play is more about the subscription and for an audience to be able to access multiple universities during a period of time. That's how they work. But for universities, it's not. It's a space where you want to be to promote yourself, and these kind of platforms are changing their business model on that basis. Because it was a revenue share with universities on the return from individual courses. Now the pitch to universities is about, we will trace which students that are doing the MOOCs are actually enrolling in your institution, and we'll do a revenue share of that journey. So that's how it's transforming for themselves as well. It's a very evolving environment.
Yeah. Paulo, what do you think about it?
Hay una preocupación.
There's a concern for those of us who come from universities, and that is quality assurance, right? All of the effort that we make to educate will be good if it provides skills. That's fine. But the issue is that the effort that we make to enhance inclusion and opportunities has to make sure at the same time that there's a certain level of quality. And there are other types of access to higher learning. Yesterday, the UNESCO General Director talked about the entry into force of the convention to recognize university qualifications, and in that tool there is a series of definitions that enable open knowledge, lifelong learning, a whole host of opportunities that we have today, but that inclusion also needs to have quality assurance. Otherwise, it will be excluding the underprivileged. Those who are marginalized will not be able to access a good education, which gives them job opportunities later. So I'm going to make a comment about that.
Quality, everything, like the university environment is very regulated, and you referred to that before. So as it is regulated generally for more traditional degrees, it's also regulated for these programs. So we have to do a lot of quality control for anything that gets put in Coursera or in FutureLearn, and those platforms have their own quality control. So what goes there is being checked. And in terms of inclusion and so on, I think it's the opposite, because in a way, nowadays I receive CVs from people from rural Spain that have a degree or a credential from Stanford or from Harvard. And they've been able to access and add that quality to their CV, that in the end they've learned it, but they've also are able to accredit it with a high-ranked institution, and they wouldn't have been able to do that before. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the quality, and the second thing about also the way we understand, apart from the quality, the needs of the new generations and the way they want to learn. So it's sometimes a bit different than traditional institutions. But Marta, now you were just mentioning one thing that I also wanted to ask you, because you are running some programs of micro-credentials. How is that working? Who's subscribing to that? Is that a little taste of something that you share with students? Is it only for your students? Is it outside?
So at the moment, well, the micro-credentials were developed for our students originally, and it was, we were working on this 4 years ago to address this issue of being able to credential transversal skills, because industry is also asking for that. We saw in the slides the critical thinking, the problem solving. So how do we accredit that our students have those skills, whatever degree they've done? So that's how we developed the micro-credentials, and many of them have been developed in partnership with industry. So we have on Agile, we have one on digital well-being, we have one on Sustainability 101, which, by the way, we've made available to the students participating in the UNESCO conference. And what we're looking now is to open them to the outside as well. So we've offered them to some of our partner institutions, but it's not something that we would commercialize. It's really not a stream of funding. Where we see that it's working better and it's driving more engagement with industries, short courses. So rather than the 4 hours micro-credential that you get your digital badge, it's short courses, 6 weeks for professionals. But there is a real appetite on these micro-credentials, and the amount of this casual badging that gets done has doubled from 2018 to today, really.
But which is this? I mean, there's not it's not a matter of money, probably. Which is the strategy behind that? Because we were debating before we started the session with Mirko also on the importance of keeping that students connected to your institution to avoid that they just leave sooner than later. Is that one of the reasons why you create these type of courses?
Those courses are mostly to be able to accredit those transversal skills, because that's what companies are requesting. They don't just want an engineer, or they don't just want a marketing expert. They want to be able to know that that person can do the problem solving, can do the communication, does have that collaborative experience, that has the global leadership or the cultural intelligence. So how do we demonstrate to industry that those students have done that? So the students go through those micro-credentials, which might involve a little bit of studying or a project, or they've done an internship, and then we give them that credential that they've done the internship and they've learned about X. So it's a way to have, what we see the future of the degrees will be, the degree is an old currency. People will want to have a portfolio of knowledge. I have this is my technical expertise. This is what I've done with practical experience. So that's how we are articulating it now, as a portfolio of knowledge that they are able to demonstrate.
Mirko, let me ask you two questions in one this time, not in two separate. The first is that we're talking about how to keep engaged the students, and sometimes the platform can help. You know, as we all know, that these digital platforms that we're talking, technological platforms, Amazon's, Facebook's, whatever, they have an important role on the way they design the platform, because they know they can leave that little pieces of whatever drug is there, so that the user experience brings like into grade levels, and you spend more time and more time and more time. Can you bring us some little drug to have more time learning and studying? I don't know if you're working on that, because that would be great for society in one side. And the second one is about one study that you made, and I think it's interesting, and what happened after the pandemic. Who wants to go back to digital or hybrid, or how do you do it?
Sure, let me see if I remember all of this. So
I can go again.
What I forget. But going back to, one, we don't have a drug that we're developing. Let's just make that clear. But I think you bring up a really good point. There are opportunities, and just tying it into the micro-credentials and the badging, we happen to have a badging solution. The reason we have that is to highlight to students what they've achieved in courses. So professors can say in this course, or deans can say that in this course, they're learning communication skills, they're learning teamwork, all of those elements, and then when they finish the course, they get a badge to show them that. Why do I bring that up? Because that engages students more with their academic experience, and it prepares them better to have conversations with employers. It doesn't matter if their degree is in art history or physics, they still have these transferable skills that they've acquired in these courses, and by having badges or some other indication that they've received those, they actually realize it. So we know students are students, right? They won't realize, oh, I'm gaining all of these skills through my academic experience. The reality is they are, and that's what employers are looking for. So that's just a quick example of that. Going to the survey, so we did a global survey across 10 countries of university leaders and current students, and asked them a number of questions, but the ones I think you're referring to are about the type of experience, course delivery experience that they're looking for. 80% of the 2,500 roughly students who we surveyed indicated that they wanted at least some of their courses to be fully online. That likely would not have been that high a percentage pre-pandemic, right? I don't have the stats, but I would guess, and I think everybody would agree with that. But that's a key message. That's 8 out of 10 students who want at least one or multiple of their courses to be delivered completely online. That's a complete shift to the way we often think about higher education. And then I think about 40% said they wanted all courses online. Now, to me, that doesn't mean the university environment has to go away. That can still be a mix of in-person and online courses. But there's an opportunity to rethink what courses are offered online versus in person. Where is there an opportunity to create a better online experience? And then I think the other element maybe to bring in is how we're teaching online. Are we using virtual reality in the classroom? Are instructors giving feedback that is recorded as opposed to written feedback? Are professors asking for assignments that maybe students can just record to do the assignment rather than writing a paper about it? Those are all options to make learning perhaps even more accessible to students because they're not going through the same steps, but also to connect them a little bit more, engage them a little bit more in their own learning process.
I had lots of things in here. I don't know if you have 6 more hours. No? Okay. No, because I wanted to talk about the students of the future, the professors of the future, the way we treat professors, and then we ask them so much, but what do we give them? How do we treat them in every single sense? Well, there are lots of things. But Paulo, Marta just said degrees are an old currency. What do you think on that? I mean, I was thinking on Bauman, Zygmunt Bauman, who used to talk about the liquid society. And I remember once interviewing or moderating, I don't remember, chairing some session with someone really smart in HR. He said something like, this is not anymore about positions because I hire people in one position and 10 days after they are something different. And so in that sense, how do we just make it work, the analogical part with this liquid world?
I was laughing when Marta was talking, because a while ago we put out a book called The University, Its Course Studies and Degrees. And it was a sort of critical look at the degree programs that we have at our universities. What's actually happening is that at universities, we're educating and training students to solve problems which during their careers won't actually be around. And the problems they'll have to solve over the course of their careers, most of them haven't yet arisen. And that's the reason that now we're talking about these new transformation processes and the academic supply, so to speak, or offerings. And we have scientific and technological fields that universities are driving forward. We in universities are mobilizing in our own core business, so to speak, our own activity, and we have to respond with much more flexible, dynamic, and open processes that enable access to universities from different paths, and not only secondary school, then higher education. We need to be able to access universities from different places. And it's important, I think, to say this. We'll never stop studying. It's a learning society. Micro-credentials, universities particularly look askance at this. And we've been doing this for centuries. Quick, short courses have been doing this for centuries. We have to take ownership, because it's not just for business to do this. And unless we do, we're going to have a serious problem.
Because then we'll not have time enough, especially for Marta. I cannot get there. I think my kids have some micro-credentials. They do it in TikTok. In 30 seconds, they learn lots of things. It's kind of crazy. I don't know if any of you want to ask anything. We have 5-6 minutes. Oh, wow, we have too many hands. Okay, we'll need short questions and short answers. Okay, we'll move that mic, and we'll bring a mic for Paulo or something so that you're more comfortable. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Diana Alazar. I work at Minerva Project. I'm listening to the conversation, and it seems to me a little bit that maybe we need to define why we have higher education. What is the purpose of universities? And at least in our definition, it's to make better decision makers in society, in their careers, in their personal lives, in their communities. And that's an evolving thing, right? And it's not for the sake, so in a sense, yes, of course, they have to be student-centric, but the student is not the ultimate customer. It's society, which is the ultimate, and I use customer between quotation marks. And what I'm hearing is that we're using all these micro-credentials and kind of different ways to patchwork what the university is not doing, rather than fixing it from the university. So whether it's to teach technical skills because the technology is going too fast and the university is not catching up, or to teach what Marta used to say, transversal skills, what we call enduring skills. These are the skills that will hopefully endure beyond 3 rotations of new technologies. And those are not taught in a vacuum. Those are learned in context. And not just in one context, in many contexts, which means I learned communication in a physics class because I need to understand how to communicate complex scientific topics. And then I do it again in sociology, and then I do it again in French, right? And to do that and do it again and again, then I learn and internalize the skill. And then I can solve new problems that don't exist yet because I have internalized the skills. So my question is, why aren't we doing this within the university rather than patching work on the fringes?
Okay, it's a short question, a short answer.
Sorry.
Just joking. But the problem is that there's not going to be such an amazing session as this one, but someone needs to come afterwards. So we have 3 minutes.
I'll just do
Okay.
very quickly, because that's exactly, and maybe I didn't explain myself well enough, but with these micro-credentials, we don't teach them communication. They report what they've learned in communication, doing whatever they do, and we accredit that. So for example, we have a micro-credential on working with global clients online. If they do a course on software development where they had to develop an app for a company in the other side of the world to do, I don't know, tracking. We did one, Daimler-Benz tracking stock in their stores. So students in Australia working with Germany for 4 months in one of their courses. On top of that, we come and say, okay, how did you learn to communicate across times? How did you learn to work in a team? How did you learn about structuring your work and communicating with a client? Fantastic. You've reported it, tick. We give you now a micro-credential of working with global clients online. We don't teach that separately. Very much to your point, really, that it's embedded in everything we do, so let's give the acknowledgement of the effort that they've done.
Okay, there were a couple more questions. Let's see if we can listen to these questions.
Hello, thank you very much. I have taken two important concepts that you put on the table that are flexibility and agility. And there is an important stakeholder here, is administration. There is a big difference between Anglo-Saxon universities and Latin universities. Here, Latin universities, we work with official degrees many times. I am consultant for the creation and legal approval of new universities. And last report I have written, I explain the subway figure that Fernando has showed to us, so that people is free to create their path and so on. And of course, the regulator told me, well, this does not follow the structure of the Bologna process. But these are not official degrees. It doesn't matter, you have a problem. Okay, so I have two questions. Maybe you only need to answer one. First one is, what should we do with the administration for getting that? And the other, maybe there is no need. When the students will stop to ask, okay, I will enroll to this program, but is this an official one? If students don't want official degrees, administration is not a problem at all. But at least in Latin countries, it's very important that the diploma is, for example, in Spain, is signed by the king. So the rector is a representative of the king. So
we'll not start talking about the king today. Today it's not the day. You know, the king is coming back.
Sorry for the time.
Can I just add, because I think it's a connected point. The fragmentation that seems to be emerging will do untold damage to quality assurance and qualifications frameworks. We need to remember what universities are. And can we please stop creating a Netflix of education? Netflix is a passive activity. A university education should never be passive.
It's a metaphor. We just use it as a way to, you know, the way they structure information they address to the clients. We don't want Netflix, technically.
There's a connected point, though. We do care about the data that we are sharing about our students within our institutions, between our institutions.
Definitely.
And the Data Governance Act in the EU that has just been adopted, we do care about that data and how it's used. So I think we need to avoid comparing universities to the Spotifys, the Netflixes, etc. It's an entirely different system.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. That's why we're talking about who addresses the algorithms. Because in here, it's important. It's not a song. It's something else. That's what we were saying. Any opinion on these couple of questions?
Sí, me gustaría decir.
I'd like to say clearly that future is going to be built with a whole host of presents. And there's a huge amount of different university systems, each with its own regulations, and those regulations have to do with consolidated agreements. And the future is indicating that we need to revisit a lot of those agreements that may overhaul what we have now. Others will consolidate things that are deeply rooted already. So each and every one of our institutions and communities will have to debate, agree, reach consensuses. And this conference has to do with just that. We're being encouraged to look towards the future and see what we're going to need to be debating and doing.
And we'll just listen to one question from the outside and we'll end up the session.
Just a quick comment, I think. I mean, in the end, students have choice. Students have choice of whether they go to a university or choose a boot camp or whatever it is. So I think that's a key element to remember in all of this. As we think about our university programs, we do have to adjust to what students are looking for end of the day, and that when they graduate, they feel like it was a beneficial experience for them and they got something from that. Because otherwise, students will find other places to go or choose not to go to a university, which is not what we want, right? And that's not the future of higher education by any means, but I think it's something to keep in mind. And by making things more student-focused, we're creating that experience for them.
I was just going to comment on the regulation side, is that we are at a moment of disruption in an industry that is higher education, in a sector. And it's being disrupted, and as it would happen in any other sector, regulation needs to catch up. So in Australia, for example, all the micro-credentials are being regulated. In the European Commission is doing a lot of work around that and around moving from one university to the other one. So it's catching up. It's just for this time, we're ahead. So it's, but you know, autonomous vehicles in the automotive sector, they've done it, and then regulation catches up. I think we're in the same point in history in this sector.
Okay, I don't know if we have any of the questions coming from the outside. Maybe we can see there. María, dinos cuál debería ser el perfil de los docentes para contribuir a la formación de los estudiantes para el futuro.
So we're being put a question in writing in the chat. What should the profile of students be?
Better way to address students for the future. Should we not also double check the profile of professors? 4 minutes? Okay, we'll finish before 3. Any answer for that? Sorry for that. This is being so passionate and amazing, you know, that we cannot finish. Any answer for that? Profile of, to review the profile of professors, teachers, and...
Yeah, I think it needs a lot of creative thinking, because really when I look at the university, all the disruption that has been happening during COVID on digitalization of our programs and the kind of integration of VR, the development of apps, augmented reality to look at molecules in your living room, that's actually hasn't been driven by the top down, by the university. It's been driven bottom up by the academics that have been really creative, passionate about that work, engaging with their students, and bringing these innovations into their classrooms. So I think the professor of the future needs that, you know? It needs to be creative, flexible, adaptable, and able to drive that change.
And then I think just quickly, the other element of that is...
I said 3 minutes, you know, quickly.
is training, right? Training for professors. And those that have taken those steps, highlight that to other faculty members to encourage them and enable them to do that, and also recognize that they are doing a lot of work to improve. So make sure you recognize them for that and value them for all of that as they transition more to a digital environment.
Thank you, Mirko. Okay, so we have to finish this session. I want to thank you especially to Mirko Wittenhorn, Senior Director at Ontology, Marta Fernandez, Executive Director at Rmit Europe, and Paulo Alcorn, Specialist in University Teaching and former National Director of University Management in Argentina. Thank you to all of you. You've got them around. You will be able to ask them anything you need, but before you leave the room, scan that code and download the paper. Thank you very much. Thank you.